What's up, everybody? I look sweaty and terrible because I biked into work today, and it's 10,000 degrees Kelvin in Washington, D.C., because we're 2.5 miles from the sun here. My name is Luke Thomas. This is the weekly live chat I do here on MMAfighting.com. Thank you for joining me on the docket today. Obviously, UFC 175, which is Saturday. It's some interesting fights, some really important fights on that card. We'll talk about them. Sunday, there's a terrible fight card headlined by Frankie Edgar and BJ Penn, which is an okay fight, kind of a weird fight, definitely an important fight. The rest of that card, though, is, with an exception here or there, terrible. Anyway, we'll talk about those things. We'll also talk about Chael Sonnen getting fired from Fox Sports, why that was probably the right call, maybe the only call to make, to be perfectly honest. And anything else that you want to talk about currently in the world of mixed martial arts. You want to get at me, do so on Twitter, at SBNLukeThomas. You may email me, luke.thomas@sbnation.com. And, of course, the best place to get your questions in, although I'm going to try to get to them on Google Plus too, but the best place to get to them is going to be on MMAfighting.com. There is a post where this window is embedded, and you can get all of your questions in there. There's still plenty of opportunity to get those in, so do that now. Anything you want to talk about, by the way, up for grabs. Green comments will get priority, but not exclusivity. With that out of the way, let's do this, y'all. Let's go right to the top. Just for that, I'm going to make it 30. All right, first question. Let's see. Let's see. UFC 175. How many pay-per-view buys does the UFC need to sell in order for you to call it a success? For me to call it a success? Also, what is the magical number for the UFC when it comes to pay-per-view buy rate for them to break even? Is it 100K buys? I actually asked somebody about this, an executive about this, who is in this field, this line of work, and his response was, it depends. It's basically around 125,000, but could go higher, could go lower. Probably not much lower, but it could go a little bit higher. It could go as high as 150. Maybe it's hard to say because it's a function of what kind of show is it. There's different production elements that go into the cost. So if it's a much bigger show, there can be a bigger production cost. In addition, if they're doing a bigger show, chances are they're going to have more expensive fighters on the roster, and there's a question of what it will do at the gate. So all those kind of factors make it a bit of a sliding scale. Somewhere between 125 and 150 is what I'm told. Could go lower, could go higher than even those two figures, but that's a general ballpark. But it's not a single numerical number. It's a range depending on those other factors: costs of talent, costs of production, gate receipts, concession receipts, so any kind of immediate money that they make in from the event itself. So that's sort of the issue there. 175, I'm sure we'll clear that with ease. I expect somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000. I don't think it'll go by 500,000, but I guess you never know. I think Chris Weidman got a big jump from the Anderson Silva fights, but I think he was, in terms of a promotional entity, folks forget he was a non-factor before. So to go from a non-factor to a star takes time. I think he's sort of people know who he is, obviously, and they're interested in seeing him fight Machida, who they also probably know who that is. But it's not quite like, oh my God, huge fight week kind of thing. It's big. Don't get me wrong, it's big. It'll do well, but I don't think it'll do. I think it'll do between 400,000 and 500,000. That's sort of my guess. But if it does more, great. Better for everybody else. Eddie Alvarez. Since Coker has joined Bellator, have you heard anything about Alvarez's situation? No, and I've asked. I know they want to keep him. I can tell you that. But that, it's a no-brainer. Whether they will or not, I don't know. Scott Coker certainly changes things pretty dramatically. I don't think that everyone in the Viacom family was necessarily united behind Bjorn Rebney's white-knuckle plan of keeping Eddie Alvarez there no matter what. But that doesn't mean that they're going to hold on to him. So we'll see. That's an interesting question. Is Chael Sonnen a sociopath? How could he slam Vanderlei for avoiding the random drug test and claim Vanderlei's entire career has been shrouded in suspicion of PED use? Well, he has 4 banned substances in his body basically at one time. 2 are essentially pro-hormones, but HGH and EPO are about the most illegal and unfair PEDs you can use. Least comment. Yeah, I've had a bunch of people sort of question whether or not he fits the clinical definition of a sociopath. I'll leave that to more experienced medical minds. Certainly, you could argue that fairly easily, I suppose. But it's funny, you know. It's a lot of different ways to look at this situation. A lot. It's going to sound like a forced. It's going to sound like a forced example, but it's the one that sort of comes to mind. If you've seen the 2 Escobars, the 30 for 30 documentary, basically it's about the story of like Colombia, to be perfectly honest. But even if you don't like soccer, it's like anybody who's seen it, trust me, anybody who's seen it will vouch for it. It's amazing documentary. Okay, It's called the 2 Escobars, and I won't get into the huge plot line, but suffice to say that there was a point in Colombia's time headed into the '94 World Cup. They had just beaten Argentina, and I won't get into the soccer talk either. Just follow me here for a second. They had beaten Argentina 5-0 in '93. They were the favorites to win the whole thing in '94. But the truth is, the whole time, this was a national team that had benefited, at least in their club development, even to some extent in their national development, because the pro soccer leagues were being used to launder money. This was the rise of Pablo Escobar, who one of the Escobars referenced in it. In other words, that they had done well, but the whole thing was just a facade. That they were talented guys, but there were factions within, guys represented different clubs, and then those clubs were threatening players on the national team to not do well or do certain things, and it all fell apart. It wasn't real. It looked real. They looked menacing. They looked interesting, but it was never really real. And it's a major tragedy because the other Escobar, Andres, who kicked the own goal and then got shot in Medellin a couple weeks later, is why it's a national tragedy over there. But the point being is like I just thought about it. It's like here was a guy who was on Bodog fights in Chael Sonnen, who was a good guy, good wrestler, had done okay. We're talking about relative to the various highest level. Certainly more athletically gifted than I'll ever be. But I guess the point for me is that I don't know, like when you have something like that in your body, you have to wonder how long he's been taking it. I don't think he just started taking EPO and HGH. He probably had been on it. I'm just speculating. It's my opinion. He probably had been on it for quite some time. I think it cast doubt over his entire career, to be honest. Certainly when he started getting better as he got older. And it just wasn't real. He tried to make something real that just wasn't real. It just wasn't in the cards for him, And he certainly did a lot with his mouth too, creating opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist. But he had to get that Brian Stann win. Right, he had to beat Michael Bisping. He had to beat Nate Marquardt, and there's an open question now whether he could have done any of those things, or whether he did them without the help of major performance-enhancing drugs. It just was never real. It couldn't be real for him, That to me is there's other lessons about Fox Sports and UFC which we'll get to later, but that to me is like I just kept thinking about that. Is he a sociopath? I don't know. I can tell you that, when I met him on the set of MMA Uncensored Live, the guy could not be more charming, and I truly mean that. Friendly, man, and I don't want to throw that into ill repute because he's been very helpful to me. Trying to get interviews with him, he's been very helpful. If you guys may remember, I did an Olympic wrestling preview with him. It was really good, But now one has to wonder: is the charm also a function? Like, is the charm real? Is he genuinely a nice guy who makes an effort to be honest? Probably. There's probably some of that. But you also at least have to wonder, is some of that charm offensive that he's able to turn on? Is some of those pleasantries he's able to glide through conversations with, are they part of his act of deceit and conning? I don't know. Certainly a tragedy. But it was never really real for him. That to me is the major takeaway. He knew it, and I think he tried to find a way to make it happen, and it wasn't going to go. Someone asked this later on, but I'll now. Do you think the UFC handled the Chael Sonnen situation correctly? I think the second round of results from the blood test where HGH and EPO were found must have really embarrassed the UFC, especially for Dana White defending Chael on TV. However, should he have been fired from the UFC, though I'm not sure what that means since Chael had retired. He was going to be serving a lengthy suspension anyway, and the UFC has multiple former and no doubt current PED abusers still under contract. Well, let's go to first things first. Fox Sports had no choice. The idea that you can have a guy who is on HGH and EPO, like literally not just testing for performance-enhancing drugs, but being the first one ever to test for both, things that he had ridiculed other athletes for, it completely makes anything he says, and I know that we already know that a lot of what he says is shtick, but it makes anything he says simply, non-credible. You cannot get up there and talk about the issues of the day when you have that kind of a record, right? And the Chael Sonnen situation is the most interesting one. Like, of all the guys who could pop, I actually think Chael is the best litmus test. Not John Jones, not Cain Velasquez, not those guys, Because, yes, the organization's champions, and that would carry its own sort of weight publicly were they to test positive. But the Chael Sonnen situation is the most unique because he wasn't the champion, but he was everything else. He was everything else. You need a guy to go to the media and share your talking points? Does it. You want me to step up and fight on 2 different weight classes and then belittle somebody in case that you need me to belittle them to sell a fight or send a message that you'd like to send? Done. I mean, he was more of a company man than Rich Franklin, could fight in 2 weight classes, and was as good of a salesman as Dana White, if not better. Right? So, no, he wasn't a champion, but he was everything else you could possibly be. So, for them to throw down the hammer on him, that's the ultimate test case, because if even he is not invincible, then nobody is. They had taken a weak stance on him. I mean, we all know that there's different levels of justice. John Jones is going to get a different kind of justice than Jason High. That's just the world we live in, right? It's not fair. It sucks. I wish it wasn't that way, but it is that way as I currently speak to you right now. And Chael Sonnen certainly had Chael Sonnen had Dana White going on TV and blaming the Nevada State Athletic Commission, which to some extent I'm semi-sympathetic to, about not providing proper compliance guidelines for these guys. Meanwhile, the guy tested positive for this stuff, and then he goes out and he tests positive for like the 2 worst things you could possibly test positive for. I mean, completely giving the finger to everybody. Dana White must have been thoroughly embarrassed. UFC must have been thoroughly embarrassed. They put this guy on their show, UFC Tonight. They put this guy on their Fox broadcast. They put this guy on not 1 but 2 different versions of The Ultimate Fighter. They put this guy on FX. They put this guy on Fox Sports 1. They put this guy on Fox Sports 2. They put this guy on Fight Pass. Chael Sonnen was everywhere. He was everywhere. He was everywhere the UFC is. Chael Sonnen was there, man. That is how important to the company he is. And so if anybody had a special form of justice, it was him. For them to make that call tells you exactly how bad the liability was this time. This time it was enough. And maybe things would have been different if this was the first time. Maybe things would have been different if he hadn't also had felony mortgage fraud charges and lost his realtor license. Maybe it would have been different if he hadn't had all the issues surrounding 117, but one after the other. And then finally to culminate in your retirement, an ignoble, totally ignoble way to retire, then compounded with after retiring, but still he took a test while he was still an active fighter. For that to happen after the organization's president went to bat for you on national television, like, oh my God, could you mess up worse? Could you mess up worse? So no, they absolutely did the right thing. And everyone's like, well, what does it matter that he's on PEDs? It doesn't matter necessarily for his commentating duty, but his commentating duty, he's positioned as a fighter, or at least certainly a former one now. If he were still on, his value add is his knowledge and know-how and understanding of the fight game because he's a competitor. He could do many other things. He has many other talents, but that's really what he's there to do. That's what he's there to provide expertise on. That's completely compromised when you have this kind of thing going on. Completely compromised. I don't know why it's even really up for debate. It's not up for debate. Which leads to my second question. The UFC, I don't think they fired him as such. Let me read you the email that they sent. My understanding, unless someone's clarified further, my understanding is that Fox Sports. Hold on. Let's see here. Pull this up. I got a million emails. I never check my Hold on, here we go. This is the email. Ready? This that I got from UFC. The UFC and Fox Sports organizations announced today the termination of their respective broadcasting service agreements with analyst Chael Sonnen. This decision comes in light of Sonnen failing a second test conducted by the Nevada Athletic Commission for banned substances in June. Sonnen was previously under temporary suspension by the Nevada Athletic Commission for failing an initial test conducted in May. They terminated his broadcasting services. They didn't fire him outright. So I don't think you'll be seeing him in Bellator anytime soon. If they may be upset with him, rightly so, and they may have terminated his contract because he basically forced them to in terms of his broadcasting career. But he's not going to be over in Spike TV anytime soon. As far I would bet. I bet there's a non-compete in his contract, all kinds of stuff. Could you respond to Ben Folks' interview with the Fox exec re-UFC? Do you think part of oversaturation could just be chalked to the fact that Fox doesn't want to pay $100 million annually for a 1 month show? I didn't see that. I saw that he did a video, which I thought was right on the money. There's an interview about this? Hold on. Well, I don't know where it is. I'll have to find it. Someone can send it to me. That'd be fine. I don't want to spend too much time on a live chat looking for it. I didn't see. I saw his video, which I thought was awesome and right on the money. He only touched on sort of like a few of the larger issues, but nevertheless, I share his positions pretty strongly, I guess you could say. But I didn't see the Fox exec one. Can't find it. Where is that? I see the. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something? Anyway. Are you shocked by the number of Chael supporters at this point? No. No, MMA fans never cease to amaze me one way or the other. Although someone says, LOL, imagine the backlash if Jones got popped for 4 separate banned substances. I mean, they'd be dancing on his grave, you know. Let's see. Do you think Dana is a person who makes decisions based on his emotions? I mean, obviously. He didn't even look at the videotape of Jason High. Just cut him, you know. I mean, is this due process? I can't understand why it was the hardest decision for him and Fox to fire Chael Sonnen. Well, why wouldn't it be? I just told you. Chael Sonnen was interwoven into the fabric of the UFC public identity. In many ways, he was it. If it wasn't him, it was certainly Dana White. Chael Sonnen is responsible for some of the most important and at least high-profile rivalries of the last 5-6 years. Chael Sonnen has been a part of UFC programming on pay-per-view, programming on broadcast TV, programming on basic cable, programming on digital subscription networks, programming on international television distribution partners, programming. I mean, I can go on, and not just on it, like featured, front and center. He was on their weekly magazine show. I mean, he was embraced as fully as one can be, while not being champion in both the UFC and Fox Sports families. Yeah, I can understand why killing that golden goose was probably particularly painful. Had to be done, but World Series of Fighting 11, will you be watching this Saturday? At a minimum, I'll be DVRing it because I do want to see Nick Newell. I favor Justin Gaethje to win. I think Gaethje's just going to put too much pressure on him, but I do like Nick Newell a lot. He's a good kid. He's a nice guy. And yeah, I want to see what happens. Obviously, there's some other good fights in that card too. Let's see. Jay-Z Cavalcante and Melvin should be a good fight too, so we'll see. By the way, this is my shout-outs too. This is my local coffee shop, the Mud House, right there on M Street. Right there on M Street. And this is my large skim latte extra shot, which means 4 shots. There you go. Yum. Luke, what are your thoughts on GSP's letter of support for his friend and convicted drug dealer, Jimmy Cordnoyer, pleading for him to receive a reduced sentence, and his then later apology letter, hoping he hasn't offended anyone? That was a letter to his fans. The GSP hurt his brand by supporting a drug trafficker linked to organized crime who is threatening to put a hit on people's heads that may cross him? Or was a later apology the right thing to do to avoid any damage control? Well, Cornwye, however you pronounce his name. Cornwye. Anyway, Cornwye, that's how you pronounce it. I don't really care. It's his personal life, you know. If he wants to have friends like this and defend them, that's certainly his right. And if he wants to have to, or if he feels he has to explain himself to fans, great. GSP can do whatever he wants in his personal life. I'm not going to sit here and assess it. I'm going to be, as Jay Rosen would say, Professor Jay Rosen at NYU, I'm going to take the savvy take, and does this hurt his brand? But we can have those conversations if you want. Let him do what the hell he wants to do. GSP, if these are his friends and he wants to support his friends, he knows them better than us. The guy sounds like a terrible person, but I don't know. Let the law do what they're going to do, and let GSP do what he's going to do. I don't. It's his life. Let him do exactly what he wants to do. A lot of people will feel the UFC will let some time pass and that Sonnen will come back after a year or so. How would you feel if this scenario indeed happens? It's actually the one I'm expecting. I don't know if about a year, and I don't know if they'll put them right back on where they were. I don't think they can or will do that. But I think it's kind of crazy if you think that's the last of Chael Sonnen. I mean, it wasn't real what he ultimately produced. You know, in the end, it's a totally phony outcome. You know, which is sort of unfortunate. But he is clever. If nothing else, he is certainly clever. I would not put it past him to find a way back onto broadcast television as an analyst in some capacity, or digital, as the two merge, basically. Digital TV and broadcast TV. I don't think you've seen the last of Chael Sonnen at all. MMA guards, as in like butterfly guard, half guard. What do you think? Who do you think has the best guard in MMA? How do you think John Jones and Ronda Rousey's guard could be? John Jones probably has a pretty terrible guard. Ronda Rousey's guard is probably pretty good, but it's probably only designed for a few things. But those things she's extraordinarily good. I should have brought my book. I meant to bring it today. Whatever. I don't know who has the best guard in MMA because you don't see it a lot. BJ Penn probably at one time had certainly the best guard in MMA. Alki had a pretty decent guard. You know who's got a really underrated guard? And you're going to laugh when I say this, but it's true, I think. For MMA purposes, in MMA contexts, who has a really good guard? Carlos Condit. Carlos Condit has a good guard, and I'll tell you why. One, he doesn't take a ton of abuse. I mean, it's inevitable if you spend time in guard in modern MMA against elite fighters, you're going to get beat on. It's just impossible to avoid it. But given those caveats, he doesn't take a ton of abuse, and he also has a hell of a chin. Second, what I like about his guard is that it's a reaction to his poor wrestling. Now, you can make a criticism about Carlos Condit that his defensive wrestling has never really gotten better, and that's probably true. What has gotten better in terms of setting up sweeps and disrupting the balance of guys who are in his guard, Carlos Condit has really turned his guard into an offensive sweep machine. And even if he doesn't get it, he threatens it. And if he threatens it and he forces you to post your hands and your feet and your knees in certain places, that disrupts your ability to then throw more shots on top or work effectively for a pass. It allows him to create distance and get up. I think he's got a good sit-up guillotine. He's got good triangles. He really just makes you defensive in his guard. He's very, very active with it, man. There is nothing worse than getting in someone's guard and they're constantly trying to break your posture. Constantly trying to break your posture, constantly trying to get your elbows out, constantly digging for underhooks, constantly pushing and turning and getting to a hip. Man, it's just annoying. It's annoying to try and fight those guys off all the time. It'll break your spirit. Carlos Condit does that, man. He does that in modern MMA context. So, is it the best guard in mixed martial arts? No, I think you could probably look at some guys who have pretty excellent jiu-jitsu pedigrees. Donald Cerrone's another guy. He's got a great guard. But for me, it's one of those guards where he understands what the value of the guard can be in modern MMA against really good guys. If you're going to get stuck in guard, use it to sweep, threaten the sweep, block, submit, and then none of those work, create distance to stand up. And I think he does an excellent, excellent job at that. Is Sonnen's second failed drug test, getting caught for EPO and HGH, a sign of possibilities for governing bodies to catch cheaters more often now with more strenuous testing, or a simple case of catching someone with their hand in the cookie jar? A little bit of both, right? I mean, on the one hand, like randomized testing is going to catch guys more often. This is certainly proof of that. On the other hand, you know, for the stuff he took, my understanding is, and that, you know, I defer obviously to medical experts. My understanding is that stuff dissipates in the bloodstream within hours. Like he got caught. They must have timed it perfectly. Perfectly. Amazing. Amazing that they got it. I don't think they're going to be that lucky all the time. It's one of the challenges in sort of getting guys who are on HGH to catch them. But certainly it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I mean, I think if you had more randomized testing, a lot of fights are going to fall through. They put in, I mean, we're talking about one fight, 3 fighters, 4 failed tests. What? Right, with Chael Sonnen, Vanderlei, and Vitor Belfort? It's madness. It's absolute madness. Randomized testing is going to be a huge problem for these guys. And, you know, let this be a lesson to everyone that this idea that this is like the cleanest sport or the most, you know, tightly tested, it's just flat out nonsense. It's just flat out nonsense. UFC women, 3 questions. 1, assuming Ronda gets past Alexis Davis, which seems likely, who poses the best threat to her that is currently signed to the UFC? Kat Zingano, but even her I don't favor to win. Which weight division, if forced to add another, would you add for women past straw and bantam? Atomweight has some strong fighters. Jessica Penny's actually trying to move up to strawweight because she's trying to get into the UFC. So atomweight, believe it or not, would have some decent fighters. For a time, there was 145s, but I think that's gone. Who would be, if not the odds-on favorite of Tough 20 strawweight tournament, your first pick were you to be one of the coaches? Torres. Tisha Torres, right? We're getting... Yeah, Tisha Torres. Luke, what are your thoughts on accusations against Mike Goldberg that he fuels American stereotypes of ignorance towards other countries by botching, how do you pronounce his name, Jonah Lomu's name in professional sport that he takes part in? This was on the New Zealand broadcast. Do you think there's any truth to this, or is Goldie just being Goldie who makes any number of mistakes and some giant ones on any given UFC broadcast? That actually is not, you guys know me, I don't think Mike Goldberg is a particularly strong broadcaster. That is actually not his fault. I guarantee you it's not his fault. Although I suppose it could be, it's highly unlikely that it's his fault. What actually probably happened is if they show a celebrity in the audience, now he's not a celebrity here, but certainly a celebrity in New Zealand, that's planned. They seat those guys in specific places. They have a VIP guest list ahead of time. They seat those guys strategically, and they have a production rundown note that goes literally second by second about when they're going to show these guys. They can move pieces around. That's all planned. That's all planned. So it's possible that he was given the right information and read it wrong. But if you look at the way in which he said the information, it looks to me like he was just given bad info. Yes, I don't know. Listen, I like the Haka dance and the All Blacks too. I don't know much about them beyond that, you know. And I like rugby. I like rugby sevens. I'm glad it's coming to the Olympics. But I'm certainly not a rugby expert. And even if I was a rugby expert, there's eventually going to be some kind of celebrity. If I was Mike Goldberg, I'm just not going to know. I can't have omnicompetence. We can all agree to that, right? You're going to have someone handhold you if you're trying to appeal to local markets. Do I know all the Chinese celebrities and how to pronounce their name? Of course not. Neither do you. So you rely on your research guys and your production people to give you that information. It looks to me like he got bad info and read it out loud. Now, certainly, if it's not Mike Goldberg's fault, it's somebody else's, and it's probably another American who botched it. So in some sense, it's right. But like, You know, it's true that there's a lot of Americans, I feel like, who keep the stereotype of our own insular nature and ignorance alive and well. But it's also true that Australians and many European countries like to fabricate this. They love. There's nothing they love more than beating up on Americans, right? A buddy of mine went to Australia and he saw, you know, Nestea, like the drink, and saw a Nestea sign. It was at a bus stop, and it said Nestea, more refreshing than a quiet American. Like, F off. You know what I mean? You know, it's fine. You want to sell your drinks, it's fine. You know, but there's a lot of that going around. They have fun with it. They like to beat up on Americans. Americans like to be lectured for some reason by people with English accents, or in their case, Australian accents. There's some sort of sophistication, I guess, in our ear conferred upon it. But I mean, yes, somebody messed up there. Somebody is worthy of getting criticized. But never forget that there's large swaths of other English-speaking and non-English-speaking populations that love to give the U.S. a shot when they can. Like, as if we're going to sort of claim that they know the ins and outs of all our celebrities and would get that right all the time, too. It's just a fun thing they like to do. They like to have fun at our expense. Certainly he made it easy in that case, or his production people did, but you get the idea. Have I listened to Stone Cold on the MMA Hour? Not yet. Probably won't. No offense to anybody else. Nick Newell on NBC. Is World Series of Fighting taking a risk putting Nick Newell on NBC this weekend? In my opinion, it is quite likely he could get brutally KO'd, which could bring lots of criticism about MMA from members of the public who have just seen a one-armed man get KO'd and would say this was cruel from the start. This is I cannot wait till we have this argument go away. The sooner this goes away, the better everybody's going to be. You, me, everyone. It, like, we're okay. How do I say this without pissing off everybody? I'm not sure I know how to do that. Look, folks, stop. It's very easy. Stop patronizing Nick Newell. That's my idea for the day. Yes? Please stop patronizing Nick Newell. Stop worrying about the lowest common denominator opinion on the capabilities of you know, athletes like this. Please stop worrying about it. This is an event that is regulated by an athletic commission. This is a fighter who has earned an opportunity. Is there a risk involved because there's a bunch of people who have the IQ of howler monkeys out there who, when they're not throwing their feces at the screen, might worry that they see a handicapped man with one arm, he just got KO'd. I'm sure that opinion exists. I don't care about them. And we need to stop worrying about whether we care about. I don't care about them. I don't care about their opinion. I don't think they're the majority. I don't think they're important. I don't think that they matter to mixed martial arts at all. I don't think they matter to life at all. That's what I think. And I think Nick Newell has been giving people like that the finger his entire career, and I'm glad he has. Stop worrying about the lowest common denominator of idiocy and people who refuse to look at people like Nick Newell as capable athletes. Trust me, he'll be just fine. And if he gets brutally KO'd, he'll get brutally KO'd, or he'll win. As for World Series of Fighting, yeah, they're taking a risk in some sense. I mean, talking about the phenomenon that you're worried about. But like, dude, one of the reasons why UFC is so successful, they've taken a lot of risk, and it's paid off. Like, they gamble a lot, and sometimes it blows up in their face. But a lot of the times it works out for them well. Are they taking a risk with Nick Newell? I suppose. If he gets KO'd, that's bad, irrespective of any issues about any disabilities he might have. Because they're losing this contender, you know. He was made to look bad on national television. But you're not going to get anywhere in the mixed martial arts promoting business by playing it safe the whole time, unless you just run amateur shows or, you know, low-level professional shows like King of the Cage or something like that, where you're just about product. You're not about pushing the envelope in any capacity at all. Please stop worrying about this. I don't care what those people have to say. And if he does get brutally KO'd, there's going to be some moron out there who works at a third-rate newspaper that's probably going out of business. Oh my God! Look at what happened. How am I going to sleep through the night? Enter. Who cares about what this person has to say? We have guys like that with the World Cup, man, and all these old people, you know, coming out. It's like Tom Lavero at the Washington Examiner. Soccer is nothing but hipsters getting together like it's Woodstock and it's hippies listening to Carlos Santana high on weed, you know. It's just embarrassing. These people are these are people that are just simply, they are a cognitive cost you have to pay, I suppose. But they're of no consequence. Their opinion is going away, and people who have disabilities need to be treated fairly. Now, the one thing as a matter of insurance that I think World Series of Fighting could do, as well as every other commission, or excuse me, MMA broadcast partner. I've been saying this about the John Jones eye poke. HBO does an awesome job of this. Show referees talking to fighters ahead of time. In the case of Newell, why not get a commission rep or a referee to just basically explain, this is a licensed fighter, he's licensed in this state, he has proven his ability to compete on this level, and we're going to treat him no differently than any other fighter. No better, no worse, no less, no more. And set a table of regulation, set a table that this is not, people don't really understand what licensing means. Set a table so that everyone understands before the match begins that everything is above board, right? I think that would benefit all broadcast partners. Leave out the stuff about, I'm in the best shape of my life, this is the most important fight of my career. Shut up. We know. Give us something a little bit more here to chew on. Give us some real nuance to the story. Develop this narrative a little bit and show us the other side of regulation that I think mixed martial arts programming desperately lacks. I have really enjoyed the new embedded series that the UFC puts out to promote their pay-per-views. What are some ways you think they could improve on that series? Make it a little bit longer, maybe. If the UFC don't sign Holly Holm, Gina Carano, or Cyborg, which right now is looking likely, looks like they'll sign Holly Holm. How many fights do you think that Rousey has left in the UFC? 5 or less? 3 or less, maybe? What is your opinion on Mike Dolce's quote, UFC athletes don't need managers, they need lawyers? He's halfway right. Most managers are terrible, but there are some managers that are very, very good. Gilbert Melendez's manager is very good and has done a real service to him. So it's true that there are a lot of managers who are just terrible and abuse their fighters, but it's also true that you can get really good managers, really good agents. Okay, pick the winner. Barao versus Demetrius Johnson. Barao. Dillashaw versus Barao 2. Probably Dillashaw. Jones versus Verdun. Wow, that's tough. I'll say Jones. I don't know. Maybe Verdun. Verdun looked awesome against Travis Brown. Pettis versus Aldo. I'll take Pettis. Aldo to beat both Mendez and Swanson. Probably. Jones to beat both Cormier and Gustafsson. Probably. Yeah, skip that one already. Elephant in the room. Is it a good thing that the UFC has been pretty transparent that they did not want to fire Chael, but they were pretty much forced to? If Chael failed 3 drug tests in his career and did not have a colorful, polarizing personality and wasn't a white English-speaking fighter that was winning for 21 minutes of the Anderson Silva fight, would this have been such a hard decision for Dana White? Same Dana White. No, exactly. Your justice is commensurate with your status, and his status was huge. They were forced to do it, but it Listen, we all want this to be a principled stance about performance-enhancing drugs, and in the end, it was, I suppose. It was also a public relations decision. It was maybe most importantly a business decision, right? I think that's the best way to look at that, and that tells you certain things about people's priorities. But that's the reality here. This was an important business decision that the UFC had to make, and there are other factors that go into that. But I think that's the best way to look at this, is not some sort of principled stance or anything else. This was a calculated business decision based on needs and wants and expectations. UFC champions and steroid use. Gun to your head, if you had to guess how many of the current UFC champions are on some sort of PED currently, what would the number be? I don't know. I decline to answer that until we just have more random testing. Because here's what I would say. If you think that we're never going to catch a UFC champion on it, I think you're crazy. Of the ones that are currently fighting, I have no idea. But just intellectually speaking, it seems to me crazy that it would be everybody but UFC champions. Of all candidates, they might be the ones who are most susceptible to wanting to take something to enhance their performance. Future Metamoris matches. Personally, I'd love to see Sakuraba compete, maybe against Willer or Henzo. God, poor Sakuraba. The guy had to get out of MMA when his ear was literally falling off his head. I'd also love to see Joe Rogan versus Jimmy Smith, two commentators in black belts. I think it'd be a fun matchup. That would be fun. Who would you like to see compete at a future Metamoris event? Well, all those matches you mentioned are fun, but those aren't really high-level guys. So the question is, what do you want to see? Do you want to see interesting matches between two guys? Or do you want to see high-level matches between two guys or girls? So Metamoris is in this position where they're having to bring down the quality of what they ordinarily could do in an effort to sell more tickets. They're bringing on UFC and MMA stars and to get more notoriety. If you look at the first Metamoris card, that was pretty much for jiu-jitsu people only. Second one, a little less so. Third one, definitely less so. And then, although the main event was pretty interesting, but this one, they're definitely realizing we need some polarizing, interesting main events to with UFC fighters who can bring more attention to this product, but that lowers the quality of it. Everyone's kind of psyched about Dean Lister versus Josh Barnett. I think that there's no way that ends in a submission. I'd be shocked because Dean lays back way too much, and he won't get submitted. But I don't really see him pressing the action a whole lot on Josh Barnett. I think Josh is going to want to there and go and prove something, but he's not going to be able to stop Dean Lister. I don't like Dean Lister in the no time limit format at all, man, or the 20-minute submission only. I don't like him in that format at all. He lays back way too much. So I think that one's actually going to suck. I think Galvao is going to run over Sonnen. The one I'm looking forward to most, and y'all haven't heard of him yet, you will. Gary Tonin versus Kit Dale. That is the one I've got my eye on big time. Obviously, Vinny versus Keenan is big too. But look out for Kit Dale. Got a huge beard, Australian guy. Got a black belt without training with a super elite team in 4 years. Didn't do so well at the Worlds this year. Got 1-1, lost one. Gary Tonin just won the Eddie Bravo Invitational. Was part of the BJJ Kumite. Tom DeBlas and Ricardo Almeida black belt. Unbelievable gas tank. Takes risks. Never gets tired. That one is going to be crazy. That one's going to be really, really good. Kit Dale versus Gary Tonin. That's the match. Of all of them on the card, that's the one you really want to watch. Trust me. Chael Sonnen versus Paul Daly. He will be back in the UFC first. Chael Sonnen. But not as a fighter. Diaz brothers and fighter pay. How many more fighters of the Diaz brothers' stature do you think would be needed in order for the UFC to start paying their fighters more? A lot more. Diaz brothers are probably not going to move that needle a whole lot. But the Diaz brothers aren't really on a cause, exactly. When I say cause, I mean a larger platform. I don't think the Diaz brothers are worried if Miles Jury gets paid more, or if Diego Sanchez gets paid more, or if Ross Pearson gets paid more. They're worried if they get paid more. They think they should be paid more. So there's a cause internally, but there's not some we need to fix fighter pay generally attitude. It's very much a self-interested thing. It's a principled stance about how they view the value of their labor. So to get fighter pay generally fixed, it would take a significantly, I mean, 10, 250, 300 fighters, something like that. I don't think even 100 fighters would work, unless it was the top 100 or something. Ronda Rousey. What are your thoughts on her recent comments that she could beat any woman in pure jiu-jitsu scenario? How do you think she would match up against female BJJ practitioners in the world? Could a match at Metamoris be a possibility for her? If they can afford her, I suspect it'll be a match. It's possible. Let me tell you the truth about Ronda Rousey and the gi. I mean, I don't have a ton of, I haven't seen a ton of footage on her in terms of rolling. I've seen some. She's better than you think she is in the gi, but the problem is, you're just not going to beat someone like Michelle Nicolini or Beatrice Machida or certainly not Gabby Garcia. I doubt she could even beat Mackenzie Dern for that matter. But not because she's probably a better athlete than most of those women, if not all of them. But the problem is, I took a seminar once, with Marilla Santana, who just took third at medium heavy in the Worlds. Used to be with Team Yamasaki, used to be with Barbosa, and now is with Cicero Costa down in Sao Paulo. And dude, for guys who only do jiu-jitsu, you cannot possibly fathom how deep the rabbit hole goes on the level of their technique, especially in a sport like jiu-jitsu, which is constantly adapting. Every new Worlds, there's a new sort of move, a new kind of positioning that everyone creates offense off of. And if you're not training those things in a gi, especially constantly, you're going to get caught in them. Honestly, I'm sure Ronda Rousey has arm bars from all kinds of positions. It's not really going to work. There's a reason why you don't see that many arm bars, hardly at all. Not just in MMA, but in jiu-jitsu. It's extremely difficult to catch one in jiu-jitsu. Extremely difficult. You can get them. Keenan Cornelius has an arm bar from the 50-50 guard. Crazy stuff. Because it's so hard to get one. How good is Ronda Rousey at setting up spider guard on one half and then reverse De La Riva on the other and then spinning underwards to take the back? Things like that. How good is her worm guard? If you don't know these things and you're not training these things every single day, which she is not, you're just not going to beat these people. It's not going to happen for you. And you don't have to be. The problem with jiu-jitsu, at least against Rousey's cases, judo is really heavy on athleticism, man. You got to be a great, strong athlete, and she certainly is an amazing, tremendous athlete. And I think she would do well at Metamoris, especially in a gi or whatever. I think she'd go further than people think, but you're not going to beat people like six-time champ Michelle Nicolini. My wife just took a seminar with her at 50-50 Jiu-Jitsu in Falls Church, and she showed the armbar she hit on Tammy Misasemi, the one where she across her back. She showed it. It's from an omoplata, which she then uses the forearm, the far leg to scoop it. I've never seen stuff like that before. Unless you're training that wasn't an accident. She didn't invent that on the fly. She trains that. So unless you're constantly doing things like that, you're going to get caught. And Rousey always overcommits on positions because she has this judo style. Like Nawaza, if you stall, they'll just stand you in some certain competitions. In jiu-jitsu, you got to spend time there. And so I think there's a lot of these judo guys have these arm bars where they're constantly in a rush. Look at Travis Stevens. Travis Stevens is an Olympic judoka. He didn't medal, but he was certainly, I saw him compete. He's very good. It's called the judo silencer. And he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He goes to Copa Podio, and he does well, but he never beats the top guys. Look at him versus Rodolfo Vieira. I mean, Rodolfo just has his way with him, So, yes, she would do better than you think she would. I truly believe that. But she's not going to beat the best. It's not going to happen for her. Remember, this is the same woman who said she could beat Cain Velasquez. All respect to her tenacity, all respect to her competitive, abilities. I'm sure she has tremendous base. But someone like Michelle Nicolini is going to sit to reverse De La Riva and sweep her immediately. That's just how it's going to happen because she doesn't train those things. She just doesn't train those things. And Gabby Garcia, I mean, please. Gabby Garcia is the size of Alistair Overeem. Like, it's excited for fight week. When was the last time you were actually excited for a UFC fight card? Does UFC 175 when the main event excite you as a consumer of the sport? It's okay. So. Again, I'm not trying to tell you, if you're like super pumped, I'm not trying to tell you not to be. I'm not trying to dampen it. I'm semi-excited for it. I wish I was a little more excited for Rousey versus Davis, but I kind of see it as a bit of a blowout. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong. I'd love for somebody in that division to challenge her. I'd love for her to have a rival, you know? But, dude, like, y'all can say what you want about oversaturation, but I love all these fights. It's killing my enthusiasm for the sport. I'm really not sure how much I love MMA anymore. Sorry. I mean, I don't. If you watch it in your terms, that's fine. I'm just going to be honest with you here. Like, it's deeply affecting my enthusiasm for this sport, and I never thought I'd ever. I arranged my life around it. You know, I pay my mortgage off of this. You know, it's the truth. I don't like seeing so much bad MMA surrounding good MMA. Just how I live. Luke, this is from Twitter. Luke, do you see Nick Diaz returning to the octagon this year? I certainly hope so. I don't know. Could the Chael pop be a publicity stunt to make UFC look good for catching dopers? No. No. Who is the San Antonio Spurs of MMA? That's a good. So 5. You mean I guess 5 wins? But see, they play like a team. Then they do have superstars, but they're aging. I don't know. That's a good question. All right. Let's keep going. All right, Machida versus Weidman. I am excited for this fight. It's definitely an important, cool fight. All right, Luke, let's cut to the chase. Machida versus Weidman. Who are you predicting to win? 1 year ago, you were slammed from us for fans for picking Weidman over Silva. I don't know exactly yet. I'm leaning Weidman. And I don't have a good answer for it yet. You know, I thought, like, Shogun wrote the blueprint on how to beat him, which is just sort of wait forward, corner him. And if you can take away his ability to blitz, then you can do a lot. You can do a lot with it. Is Weidman that guy? I don't know. Part of me feels like he'll actually be able to use his wrestling a little bit. Part of me feels like his striking is going to look better. I mean, one of the things I said when I thought Weidman was going to win, and it was a gamble. I admitted at the time I was gambling. Was that from the Mark Munoz fight to the first Silva fight and other previous fights, what I had seen from Weidman was we always hear the cliche talk of this guy gets better every time he fights. But Weidman, like, demonstrably was getting, like, the learning curve was incredible. And so I thought, if that keeps, I don't see a reason for that to stop. If that keeps going, I think he has the potential to really cause some problems here. Now, of course, none of us saw the first fight happen the way it did, and certainly maybe the second. But he beat Silva up the entire time they fought. He didn't lose any moments of any round, really. So the question is, has that stopped? Maybe the surgery, maybe on his knees, maybe the injury affected him, potentially. But I wonder if the striking has gotten crisp enough for him to close the distance and keep Machida on his heels. That's sort of what I wonder. Remember, Dominic Cruz said Lyoto Machida had some of the best footwork in mixed martial arts, not because of the way he moved around his opponent, but the way in which he moved caused his opponents to move into him in ways that he wanted. It's going to be interesting to see how Weidman handles that. But part of me feels like he will at some point be able to close the distance and take away that movement from Machida. But if you're picking Machida, I certainly see no reason to back off from that. It's one of these fights where it was like, oh, you can never make a pick. Just grab your balls and pick one. But it's not really about that. Like, these are MMA at its best is when it's uncertain. It's when there is an air of uncertainty. It's also good when underdogs, completely alter the way in which you perceive the sport. But But this one it's hard to see. It's hard to every time there's a fight, like for example, the first Shogun Hendo fight. I was trying to think like which way is this going to go, and everyone's like, oh, Hendo's going to do this, no, Shogun's going to do that, and I was like, I can see those things happening, but I don't know that there's a tremendous likelihood over one or the other. And what ended up happening was this crazy fight. Now I don't know if these two are going to have that kind of a fight. Machida doesn't fight that way, but I just mean whenever I have this, and it doesn't always happen this way, but a lot of times when I'm unclear about which sort of skill set's going to take over, it's usually because the two guys are evenly matched and they have to be more offensive than they normally are to win. And I'm hoping that's the case here, but I guess we'll see. Brian Stan. I am the biggest Brian Stan fan in the world, as a fighter, as a broadcaster, as an analyst. So putting my biased opinion aside, do you think he'd be the best option to replace Sonnen in all his Fox capacities? Yes, 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 and what's the word I'm looking for? Let me think here. Oh, yes. Yes. You have a guy who is a Marine Corps captain, Naval Academy grad, who can commentate across other sports, credibly, does boxing, mixed martial arts, and college spoken, talks well, is well spoken, educated, has a good look for TV, is friendly, affable, yet focused, is a tremendous broadcaster for color commentary, which it was never clear Sonnen was that guy. How you don't give that guy more opportunities if he wants them, and now that they're available, is beyond me. I don't think he wants to move his family to LA, which may have something to do with the UFC Tonight stuff, but yeah. BJJ for self-defense. Luke, I've noticed a few times you mentioned BJJ is excellent for self-defense, particularly for women. As someone who has never trained BJJ myself, can you explain how a situation might play out where a woman 110, 130 pounds who has BJJ training, blue or purple belt level, gets attacked in a dark alley by a man 170, 190 pounds with no training? Would the woman be able to fight him off and run away? Would she choke him and break out one of his limbs? At what point does the size and strength of the man outweigh the technique of the woman? Well, listen, there's always, because BJJ is good for self-defense, particularly for women, it's not complete. That woman could get punched in the face and then knocked out clean, and then God forbid, raped, and something else terrible happened to her. She could be killed, So it's not going to protect you in all cases. If someone has a knife, someone has a gun, your BJJ is probably pretty worthless, It's just one measure of insurance you can take to protect yourself. Boxing is another great one. Thai boxing is another great one. These are all great forms of self-defense. And they're sports too, I suppose, but those skills, are translatable to situations that hopefully you never have to use, but you can. So when I say BJJ is good for self-defense, you're definitely going to be able to find circumstances where it's not going to be able to work, where I'm 1,000 pounds. If there's a girl 120 pounds, even if she's a purple belt or Rumble level, if striking's involved, I'm going to have my way. Like that's just how it goes. So it's not some sort of complete system where it will protect you in all circumstances. It will protect you in many. Hopefully you never have to use them. I think it also does. One thing that martial arts does that people don't realize is it makes you more self-aware of your own limitations, about which battles are worth fighting and which ones aren't, about which situations you want to put yourself in and which ones are good to avoid. And when you've been tested and thoroughly beaten down but also overcome adversity, you just sort of have a better sense of staying out of trouble. I really, truly believe that. Eventually trouble will find you, but you get the idea. In this particular case, if someone's a purple belt level, a legit purple belt, and she's outweighed by, let's say, 40 to 50 pounds, that is definitely not insurmountable for her. She should definitely, at a minimum, be able to get away. She could potentially hurt him. She could potentially choke him. But I think at a minimum, she'd be able to find ways to get away, or at least protect herself for a longer interval of time. Again, we're not talking about a complete system of self-defense where you're just going to be June Reed. Remember June Reed? If you guys grew up in the D.C. area, but it was a national chain. June Reed, nobody bothers me either. You guys remember that? It'd be something like that. So, but it's not. It's never. There's never going to be a situation where you have a self-defense system that's just absolutely complete. It just doesn't exist. Also, what if that guy knows boxing? You're SOL. Pat Miletich recently announced he is going to the UFC Hall of Fame. I really enjoyed his commentary work in Strikeforce. Love to see the UFC use him in a similar capacity. What are your thoughts on Pat? I think I think the bad blood between he and White runs too deeply. I think Miletich, he was an early star for them, the welterweight division. But I remember he's been associated with every rival almost that the UFC's ever had. He was a coach for the IFL. He competed for the IFL. He was part of WAMA. He was a big fan of Strikeforce and had done commentary for him. Like, he's always been on the outside of trying to tip the balance of power in MMA. For him to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, actually, I'm sort of impressed by. It's really, I mean, it's like détente, like between he and White. It's interesting. It's really interesting. But for him to be involved in all these things where they wanted to not strip power from the UFC, but sort of build up other organizations so that there was a more level playing field that could be more fighter-friendly, it is a bit surprising that he's being greeted for the UFC Hall of Fame, but it's a credit to them for actually putting a guy in there who, I thought Miletich was slightly bit boring when he fought. That's just my personal opinion, but certainly has all the credibility from an athletic standpoint that you could possibly need. And so I like that. I like that they're putting somebody in there who, on meritorious grounds, for what he did in the cage, is going in there. Matt Serra and the TRT story. Luke, I found it a bit strange that Matt Serra TRT comments were turned into an article a few days later. Why would that not be? How do journalists decide what story they will run with and what story they won't? If a fighter was a particularly good friend of MMA fighting, would he get more leeway with what he can do in his private life? There is no fighter who is spared. I can't think of a single circumstance we've ever covered for somebody who we thought fondly of, ever. And we don't all think the same way. Ariel might like certain guys that I don't like. I might like certain guys that he doesn't like. Chuck might like certain guys that me and Ariel both don't like. There's not a uniform feeling about everybody. Matt Serra TRT comments are interesting. Why would that not get coverage? GSP writing a letter about a drug kingpin. Why would this not get coverage? This would get coverage, right? Like, these are relative. They're not, I think, the most important news stories ever written. No, but certainly worth an article, right? I mean, why would you not write about that? That seems to me interesting. It's relevant. You get clicks. Mike Dolce, obviously great at what he does. What are your thoughts on Mike, and have you ever used or looked into the Dolce diet? I've looked into it. I don't know much about it. I don't know what sort of official certifications he does or he has. The only thing I can say about it is the results speak for themselves. He's able to get these guys who need to make weight on weight. Kelvin Gastelum, maybe he should have paid for it. Kind of crazy that he didn't. But I don't know that he's a certified nutritionist. He might be. I'm literally saying I don't know. I don't know if he has proper certifications for this sort of thing. But if you're a fighter and you have a desperate need to make weight, there are worse things you can do than call him. Someone asks, I'll just answer it real quickly. How long do you reckon it would take to reach blue and purple belt gradings in BJJ for someone who is a decent athlete, training 2 to 3 times per week at a legit gym, and also competing, say, once a month, every 2 months, that doesn't hand out belts easily, and also has 3 to 4 months of previous experience in practicing BJJ? It should take you about 1.5 to 2 years on that account to get blue, and it should take you, unless you're really, really good, it should take you 2 to 3 more years to get your purple. But Kit Dale got his black belt in 4 years. So did Mike Fowler. So, youngest champ. Hey Luke, John Jones currently holds the record for the youngest UFC champion at 23 years old. Do you think this record will ever be broken? And do you have anyone in mind? No one in mind, but I'm sure that record will be broken. BJ Penn. Luke, BJ is only days away from stepping back into the octagon, and Dana is already flapping his gums about pushing BJ into retirement should he lose. Don't you think it's wrong of him to put this out there days before this fight? Absolutely not. The fact that they even gave him that season and this fight is just because they felt like probably doing BJ a solid. but I would like to see him retire too, and I don't see any problem with sort of guiding these guys out early. Everyone's like, you could never tell a man to retire. I can't tell you what to do, but I'm allowed to voice my opinion. I think you should retire. You're going to do whatever the hell you want to do. You can't tell a man. I can't tell him to. I'm not his father. I can't tell him to do anything. But if you have concerns about a person's health, if you've seen they've already accomplished everything they can possibly accomplish, and you realize that they're getting older, would you not voice these concerns? Voice them. They can do what they want with them. Voice them. I've never understood the argument. You can never tell a man to retire. Yeah, you're right. I can't. I can just voice my opinion about it. I think he should retire. Struve's return. What do you think about Stephen Struve's chances in his bout with Matt Mitrione? To me, the fight certainly fits nicely into the striker versus grappler trope with some very sizable deficiencies on both sides. That one's going to be crazy because Struve... Oh, my wife's calling. She should know by now I'm doing my chat at this time of the day, should she not? Let me tell her real fast. I know it sucks, I'm not supposed to do that, but I have to. There we go. I thought Struve had a better jab than he previously did, but still not enough of one, which means I think the big winging right hook of Matt Mitrione will probably be able to find the mark. On the ground, Struve has an okay guard for a guy his size, you know. Takes a little bit more abuse in it than he should, but he's pretty active with it too. I don't know, with the long layoff like Stephen Struve has had, hard to say. I favor Struve because I think he's got more ways to win, a little bit younger, but nevertheless an interesting bout. So I really don't know. Whenever a guy's had that kind of a layoff, any kind of certainty about what their style is or is not going to be, I think is really foolhardy. Struve has a way of competing where he spars the way he competes, he spars hard, so that it's a real natural transition for him. So maybe there won't be quite the ring or cage rust that other fighters might experience because they have such a differential between the two. But nevertheless, that time off, you have to respect it. I really truly believe you have to respect it. Not everyone suffers from cage rust, but many do, and he might be one of them. True or false? Rory McDonald is the welterweight champion in 2015. False. No one currently in the middleweight division wins a round against Weidman. That's not true. False. JDS versus Kane 4 happens. True. Tyron Woodley would convincingly beat Hector Lombard. Convincingly. False. Ronda Rousey retires undefeated. False. John Jones retires undefeated. Matt Hamill lost, not counting. False, because I think he goes to heavyweight. Chael becomes a fighter, commentator, or analyst in a smaller promotion. Don't bet on it. Brazil versus Colombia. Luke, what are you looking forward to as a sports fan? UFC 175 or Brazil versus Colombia this Friday? P.S. Please call into the Short Dog Roundtable this week. We're having a huge party at my house on Friday. It's going to be Little Bogota in my house. There's going to be so many Colombians over, man. It's going to be awesome because it'll be in July 4th, Los Estados Unidos, and then Brazil versus Colombia at 4 p.m. plus France versus Germany that afternoon. It's going to be a crazy, crazy day in my house. But if you're asking me, I'm definitely looking forward to Machida Weidman, but Colombia beating Brazil would just be I cannot imagine what the melee would be in my home. True or false? Luke Thomas still has drug stories he wishes he could tell us but can't. True. Dana White fears random drug testing will do to MMA what it did to baseball. I think all of us do. Chael Sonnen could rob the Fertitta Casino and Dana wouldn't want to fire him. False. Chael Sonnen could stab Chuck Liddell and Dana still wouldn't want to fire him. True. Chael Sonnen could head the Las Vegas Culinary Union and Dana still wouldn't want to fire him. You get the idea. Chael Sonnen should become a professional wrestler. Probably true. With Chael gone, Mike Dolce is the new best self-promoter in the business. Maybe. True. UFC 175 will outsell UFC 162. False. Weidman versus Machida has more than a 50% chance of being a boring Machida versus wrestler fight. More than a 50% chance? False. Weidman is the best American grappler in the UFC today. That might be true. Weidman could sub Jacare in MMA, not in Jiu-Jitsu. If Greg Jackson were coaching the U.S. men's national team, they wouldn't have found their waterfall, scored the equalizer in extra time, warrior spirit. I don't know about all that. Someone asked a question about James Muntasiri, who fought Joe Ellenberger. I won't say a whole lot about Muntasiri. I think it's too early to tell. But he fought my co-host on the SiriusXM Fight Club, R.J. Clifford, in RFA. He beat him, but R.J. went the distance with no. R.J. got stopped in the third, I believe. Women's MMA. Luke, Scott Coker made comments about bringing women's MMA back to Bellator. How will this affect UFC's negotiations with the likes of Carano and Holm? Do you think Bellator should try to sign them? What do you think their chances are if they do? Carano, I don't know. I thought she had a decent relationship with Scott Coker, but people tell me she does, but it's not like some sort of crazily close relationship. Holly Holm, I think, will end up in UFC because that's probably the best opportunity for her, but Scott Coker's going to need time, and he's going to need a couple of names over there. And I don't know how he's going to do that exactly, but I'll be curious to see his plan. UFC 177. Luke, what do you think is going on with UFC 177? I don't know. Wasn't Jones Gustafson supposed to be on that, and then they moved it to a later date, 178, I believe. And now they don't know. I have no idea. It's like in a month and a half or a little later, maybe like 7 or 8 weeks. 7 weeks, I think. I don't know what they're going to do with that. But if they can't get anybody good on it, I know they're not going to, but if they can't get anybody good on it, it'd be awesome if they could put it on Fight Pass. Wouldn't it be awesome if, like, rather than just canceling a show, like, let's say UFC 151 happened again, right, or a similar situation where main event falls out for some reason and the sub doesn't want, or the guy who's left doesn't want to face the sub. You still got all those fights in the card, right? I mean, you can't put it on pay-per-view anymore, so you're forced to cancel it. But wouldn't it be awesome if we lived in a world where you could put that on Fight Pass? I think that would be an awesome use of Fight Pass, you know. If UFC 175 gets under 500,000 pay-per-view buys, is it considered a failure? I mean, failure might be a strong word. 4 to 5, I would say 4 to 5 is probably expected. I think it's going to take time to build Weidman up a little more, and I think as long as he keeps beating these middleweight killers, if he beats Machida, if he beats Bellator, he'll be a much bigger star. But I don't think he's quite there yet. You know, you can look around, man. There's not many people who can move the needle past 600,000 pay-per-view buys in UFC anymore. But that's where we are. Josh Barnett, how do you think a fight with him and Bigfoot would end? I would favor Josh Barnett to win heavily. On the BJ bandwagon, a lot of people, including myself, went on the BJ bandwagon when he released a video of himself shadowboxing shirtless. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you get on the bandwagon? I've never been on the BJ bandwagon. I was on the BJ, you know, I've been a fan of BJ Penn for so long, it was never a bandwagon for me, man. We all get sucked in again when we see BJ at the weigh-ins. No. The only way I will change, here's an easy way to figure out if you should get on the BJ Penn bandwagon, if you can beat Frankie Edgar. If you can beat Frankie Edgar, okay. Then I have to take back my criticism. But until then, let's go to Twitter here. If Notorious MMA, so that's Conor McGregor, knocks out Diego Brandao in the first round, should he get a top 6 guy, Poirier or Lamas? They're probably going to fast track him, but I would like to see him get top 10. I mean, beating Brandao is important. It says a lot. I think Brandao's gotten better as a fighter. In some ways worse more recently, but from when I first ever saw him, the progress is undeniable. But I just don't want to rush McGregor along too much, man, because if he's everything we think he could be, what a mistake it would be to rush him along, you know. But maybe he can handle it. Maybe I'm being a nervous Nelly. Maybe I'm being too cautious, and maybe pushing him at that pace is exactly the right thing to do. I still think they should make that Cole Miller fight, to be honest. It'd be a good chance for both guys to get experience. I kind of want to see it. I think Miller is maybe in some ways less of a test than Brandao, and in some ways more. I don't know. I would still want to see that Miller test. Oh, my goodness. Hola. Baby, I'm doing my chat. Can I call you back later? Okay, I love you. I'll call you later. All right, tell bye. Had to do it, y'all. All right, let's go back to the chat. Fertitta Brothers, this is very out of date, but I still want to know this. In an old interview with HGNet, the NY politician Bob Riley mentioned that the Fertitta Bros are in bankruptcy court in Vegas for $7 billion greens. Not their personal fortune, it was Station Casinos. And it's kind of a complicated story, but in the end, the Fertittas actually retained more ownership in the process. I'll just leave it at that. But it wasn't like their actual personal debt. It was Station Casinos. After restructuring, anyway. Anderson versus Nick Stakes. Hi, Luke. I was wondering if you could get your take on the possible fight between Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz and the corresponding effects it would have on each person. First, do you think the UFC would pay Diaz whatever he wants in order to get this done? Probably not, but maybe. Where would each end up with a winner and a loss? This is one of those fights I really enjoy because I'm not sure that a win would be impressive depending on how it happened. And a loss, again, depending on how it happened, could be damaging. If let's say, Silva got knocked out again, you would say, ugh, that's bad. But if both guys fought hard and came out on the other end not too banged up, or they both got similarly banged up, or something like that, again, the complexion here really kind of tells you what would happen. But the reason why I like the fight is because, one, it will sell. Two, I think it's an interesting style matchup because I think the guys would fight each other. They have very similar skill sets in terms of they both like to box. They both have great jiu-jitsu. Nick's a little bit better with jiu-jitsu. They both don't have great wrestling. They would match up really well. They're both kind of long and lanky. Nick Diaz, though, not much of a kickboxer, so there's a bit of a difference there, but much more active with the hands. Tremendous chin. So for me, it's like there's not a lot that can go wrong. There are things that could go wrong. There are things that could happen where you would say, you know, that was a risk we took and it made him look bad. For example, the way in which Fedor lost to Dan Henderson was particularly bad. You know, getting knocked out. I mean, you can cry about the ref stoppage. I don't think it was the best ref stoppage in the world. I don't think it was the worst one either. But the way in which he got knocked out like that, I mean, it was bad after 2 losses, but certainly it was really bad just to go all flat like that, you know. Something like that could happen here, but I don't know that Nick Diaz is the guy to do that to him, which is why, I mean, Nick Diaz could beat him, but I don't know if that's, you know, one-punch shot. I don't know if he's that guy. I mean, I know he did to Robbie Lawler the first time they fought, but you get the idea. So the reason why I like it is because there's so much win, and there's very little, at least on paper, there's very little that could happen that would uniquely damage the guy from a sales standpoint after the fact. That's why I like it. Because you could say, hey, look, Nick's not fighting in his weight class. Anderson Silva is, you know, how many fights does he really have left? The guy's 40 basically. It's all good. It's all good and well. That's why I really sort of like this fight. I really think that you can write off a loss for either guy in you know 90-95% of circumstances. Luke, what are your thoughts on UFC holding an All-Star weekend similar to the NBA? There's wrestling, BJJ matches and tournaments, arm wrestling, punching, kicking, power measurements, push-up contests, and even a technique challenge where fighters demonstrate techniques that are cool and get rated by judges on difficulty, effectiveness, and aesthetics. I haven't heard a lot about it, but listen. I think if you're a fan, you know, this is one of the ones you want to go to. You should go to a UFC fight expo. You should go and do the Was it a 5K run in the morning? Do that. Go do a 5K run. Even if you're not in the greatest shape, go walk it, or run it, whatever shape you're in. Go to the fight expo. Go to the fights. Like I think that you'd have a really good time. The UFC, if you're really in on their product, they really, I think, take live events like that pretty seriously in terms of catering to the fans' needs. And people always ask me, like, when I was in Baltimore, hey man, what are the things in town we can do? And there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, there are the fights, or the weigh-ins, or the fan Q&A, but that's not a whole lot you can do. With this stuff, though, you can watch Dana Cormier in a wrestling competition in his new cage fighter wrestling shoes. You can go and watch, a lot of times they have these Grappler's Quest events, or you can go watch things you talked about. You can do the run, which is just sort of fun to be a part of. I think that is what you definitely would want to do. Like, if you're going to pick a show to go to, try to pick the bigger ones like this. Maybe it's more costly, and obviously you have to be sensitive to those kinds of realities, but at the same time, if you want to get a full, immersive fan experience, that seems to me the obvious choice. It's a question that didn't get 3 recs, but I want to answer it anyway, and it comes from Chris27, who we all know is a really good contributor. Is there another sport that has fans that actively root for its failures? Is there any other sport that has a large portion of the fan base actively rooting for and being happy when the sport does low ratings, bad pay-per-view buys, low gates, works going under? Well, first of all, I wouldn't say it's a huge portion of the fan base. I would say it's a small portion of actually the hardcore fan base. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is the answer is yes, there definitely is, but not in the way in which you think. No one is rooting for MMA to fail. What they are rooting against is what they perceive as mismanagement of the sport by its actors, right? People root against the NCAA. That doesn't mean they don't want to see Duke play UNC in basketball. It doesn't mean they don't want to see Florida versus Georgia in football. It doesn't mean they don't want to have track and field. It doesn't mean any of those things. But it does mean that they don't like the NCAA. Or, in a lesser example, being David Stern getting booed mercilessly at every NBA draft, mercilessly booed. Every time he comes, Roger Goodell too, there's a distinction between not liking leadership or having issues with leadership choices and not liking the sport. I think MMA fans do like MMA, but they probably have a fair amount of issues, certainly I do, with how some of the things are currently being run or decisions that are made. Doesn't mean my opinion should be listened to. I'm going to state it no matter what. I think I'm right, but you think you're right, everyone else thinks they're right. That's all of our choices. But it's not true that I root against MMA. What I do when I bring up low ratings or bad pay-per-view buys is evidence of mismanagement, is evidence of business strategy that I think needs to be reevaluated. Who wouldn't want an event like UFC 100 again? Who doesn't want an event where the world stands still to watch it? How much fun is that? And who is not having fun with this World Cup? Who are these sticks in the mud who just can't get on board? You know what I mean? There's a dwindling bunch, but like, don't we all want that? Don't you all want a moment in time where everybody stops and they watch MMA because it's the most important thing in sports to do that day? Doesn't anybody want that anymore? Of course we want that, but we are so far from that, it's not even funny. And I don't think we have to be. I don't think it's an inevitable conclusion that we end up in the place that we are. And it's not true that I disagree with every UFC decision or everything that Spike and Viacom do. It's not the case. I think a lot of what they've done is success that they've earned, and I've been wrong about certain opinions I've had in the past, but oversaturation is real. It's not an exaggeration or not some media fabrication. It's a real, measurable thing. And there might be some great things about it. Maybe some portions of it will work out, but there are also some very negative consequences to it that everyone just needs to accept as a fact. And what are you going to do about it? I know there are negative consequences to oversaturation. It's not up for debate. It's a real thing. There might be some other good things about it, but it's not all good or all bad. Anyway, so no one hates MMA, but they might have some issues with World Series of Fighting going head-to-head with UFC 175. They might have issues with there being too many UFC cards. They might have some issues with previously going revenue in the tournament format, and they want to see Spike do poorly, But that doesn't mean they hate the sport. It means they have issues with the actors in the sport. We'll do one more, and then someone goes, "Is MMA bigger than soccer yet?" LOL. By the way, who didn't have fun watching that U.S. men's national team game yesterday, especially in the last 15 minutes when Dempsey and then Wondolowski almost hit on the set piece? Oh my God, man, I almost had a heart attack. Do you think Colombia has any chance against Brazil? Not only do I think Colombia has a chance against Brazil, I think they're going to beat Brazil, and I think Guilherme Cruz is going to be crying. James Rodriguez. And then Chris27 asked a really good question about why MMA fans are different than boxing fans and their appreciation of smaller fighters. I don't have a chance to read it all yet, but it's towards the bottom of the post, and it's really smart. I think all the things that he lists, all the things that I would probably list, but it's important to sort of consider why do boxing fans have no problem supporting lightweight fighters, including down into the 110s and so forth. Certainly in the 140s, Mayweather, Pacquiao, and whatnot. And yet we have a problem with it in mixed martial arts. There's got to be some sort of explanation for that. He has a good comment about it. I recommend you check it out. Anything else, Green? Because I have to show you something. Rin Nakai. Let's be real. Does Rin Nakai stand a chance versus Tate? I actually think she does. I think she'll lose, but... Who was Front Row Brian, and why does he have such a beef with you and Ariel? I don't know. I don't care about him. All right. Before we get out of here, I mentioned this on Twitter. I came to work today. As I mentioned, I rode my bike in scorching heat, like an idiot that I am, with a black T-shirt on. And I get to work, and the lady at the front desk goes, "Hey, look, there's a package for you." And I'm like, I didn't order anything. Like, that's kind of weird. So like I was like, what could this possibly be? And it was, I'll show you the box. And I'll show you the address. Like, you know, I don't care if you know where I work, but let me see if you can see here. So this is the box it came in, right? So it's an Amazon box, right? It's an Amazon Prime. And so I was like, why is someone sending me what is this? And here's who it's from. Amazon Fulfillment Services. I don't know what the hell that is. I don't use Amazon a lot. I use it sometimes, but not much. So I open it up. I swear to God, I open it up. Ready? Can you see this? Someone sent me a bottle of A1 steak sauce. Is that not awesome? As you guys know, I think if you use A1 steak sauce, you have the palate of a toddler. And I don't know if the person is telling me I have the palate of a toddler or just as a joke about me mentioning that, but nevertheless, super funny, and I appreciate the gesture even if you're mocking me, because you took the effort to actually do that. Find where I work, and then buy me a bottle of A1 steak sauce. So there you have it. One of you has a good sense of humor, and I greatly, greatly appreciate that. That's very funny. Email me, luke.thomas@sbnation.com. Get at me on Twitter, @SBNLukeThomas. I'll try to answer Chris 27's question about the difference between MMA fans and boxing fans as it relates to lighter weight fighters. If you have any additional questions, just hit me up. I'll try to do my best to answer them. I appreciate your support. Lots of coverage headed your way starting tonight. There's open workouts today. We'll have a bunch of videos, a bunch of photos, so get ready. Fight week is here. Fight week, blog week. It's here, guys. See you next time. Stay frosty.